Welcome back, everyone. We have another ranking. This time it's a special ranking. It's a top 30 strongest all-time video, meaning we will be discussing the 30 strongest characters of all time. And granted, this was a very difficult list because trying to compile a list of all these characters and speculate how strong they were in their prime was extremely difficult. Like, this really took a while to, I guess, come to terms with myself because I kept moving characters because this list, again, we are compiling the top 30 strongest characters of all time, meaning the top 30 strongest characters in their primes. So older characters, current characters, we're going to try to slot them all together and come out with a top 30 list that I actually like. I've moved so many people around so many times. I'm like, you know what? Let's just put this video out. People are inevitably going to disagree, but I'm comfortable with it. And of course, this will be annual, like the top 30 strongest current characters. We do that all the time, but this is the top 30 strongest all time. If nothing significant happens, which I expect it to happen during the Battle of Onigashima, the list would change because characters are moving up, characters could move down, we don't know. But for right now, let's get into my list for the top 30 strongest characters of all time. But before that, some quick honorable mentions. So I went back and forth in regards to adding Calgara and Norland. They do have feats and we know that they were on par. So wherever you put Calgara, you should put Norland. However, it's hard to scale because Calgara, what they said, anyone that went to his country would take care of them. So he has a similar feat to another character that's on this list, but it's not significant enough where I could accurately put him somewhere. Like, I was just slotting him somewhere. I was like, I don't know. So Calgara and Norland aren't on this list. Momoshage and Shaitan aren't on this list. Why not? I just didn't feel like it. I want to see them actually do an attack first or something before I do it. At least Lucky Roo, I saw him shoot someone. Lucky Roo might be on this list. No, spoiler alert, he's on the list, right? So thought about NL and Rob Lucci, those guys. NL, I was scaling him up, assuming he has Haki. Rob Lucci as well, I scale him forward as well because he has progressed in the story, he hasn't remained stagnant. Thought about some Supernova, but yeah, that's about it. Without further ado, let's get into this list. I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible because last time it took a very long time, it was over 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to try to explain my points a bit quicker so that we can get through this list because it's 30 characters, right? So let's go. Number 30, we have Lucky Roo. Like I mentioned, Lucky Roo is on the list. Lucky Roo is one of Shanks' commanders. Shanks' commanders, they make the list. More than one makes the list because Shanks' commanders, they've been hyped up more than any other Yonko's crew commanders. When Shanks' bounty was revealed, his commanders were also mentioned, and apparently Shanks has the most balanced crew. So I would assume that Shanks' commanders are slightly higher than any other Yonko's commanders. So I was comfortable having Lucky Roo on the list. Even the River cards, they said that Lucky Roo was the fighter of the crew, so that added to it as well. King, we expect to be Kaido's strongest commander. King could move up this list after Onigashima, but ultimately, his only fight will be his final fight. We may see some abilities and attacks before he gets defeated, but that's the difficulty with One Piece sometimes, where these characters, they only get one moment to shine and they better show out. So for King, being Kaido's strongest commander, I expect great things, and just off of that, I have to put him on this list here. And Katakuri and King, they're interchangeable, but I've seen Katakuri and I've seen Katakuri do some amazing things. Future Sight, his Black Mochi, Awakening, his Devil Fruit, I think is very versatile and cool. Ultimately, he lost to Luffy. People will say, well, Luffy lost to him, but Katakuri gave up. Luffy walked out the mirror world, right? I have qualms about that. You guys know about it. But at this point, based on his abilities, his Future Sight, etc., and Luffy is going to easily scale this list after Onigashima. But for right now, I'm comfortable putting him on right-hand commander level. Sometimes even saying that is weird because we know all the right hands, I expect him to be of different power levels per se. But I think right now Luffy's competing with any right hand and he's beating most of them, but not all of them. So I'm comfortable with that after Onigashima, where we see Rio, we see Gear 4th, maybe a better gear, maybe a more complete Gear 4th, and also the Haki blooming after fighting Kaido or Big Mom. Luffy will scale this list. At 26, I got Marco, and I don't think people give him the credit he deserves because of free time skip and looking at things that transpired back then. Again, the power structure was not fleshed out in a way which was conducive to someone like Marco. Marco was running support the entire war. He overpowered Kizaru. He filled in the gaps that the Whitebeard pirates needed. So he didn't have a great moment to shine. He went up against Garp. Well, not went up against Garp. He got caught off guard by Garp and he was knocked out of his Zoan form. So he didn't have a dominant performance at Marineford, but I feel like he was going up against Admirals, and Admirals are some of the strongest characters in the series. So I expect to see Marco again. The Whitebeard pirates get more respect from me knowing that they tied with the Roger pirates. Granted, Marco was just an apprentice back then, but for him to rise through the ranks to become the first division commander, again, Whitebeard's commanders, they're not used for strength, but the consensus for the most part scale Marco as the strongest commander. So Luffy's going to surpass Marco by the end of Onigashima, but for right now, Marco over Luffy. A lot of people think I overrate Shiryu because they don't view Shiryu the way I do. Shiryu tied with Magellan back then, even with the overweight overwhelming powers that Magellan had, or he was on Magellan's level. They were stated to be somewhat equals. Now he has a new devil fruit power. How that's going to work with his fighting style, I'm not sure. Maybe he can send flying slashes that are invisible. I will talk about this in another video, but observation haki expected to be upgraded as we go forward in the story. Something that sticks out for me was when Luffy was in Zou and he can sense the minks that were behind him. If Shiryu can do that with his invisible devil fruit, then that will make it a lot more difficult for people that are even observation haki users. Also, Shiryu, I presume, is Blackbeard's strongest commander, so at some point we have to start scaling him accordingly, and personally I'm ready to start doing that. Sabo is the right hand of Dragon from what we know. I believe personally there's somebody else out there that is stronger than Sabo. That's a part of the revolutionaries, but that's another conversation for another day. But Sabo is very impressive. Somewhat tying with Fujitora, granted. Fujitora looked a bit more fresh than Sabo after their matchup. Sabo did ask Fujitora for more and he gave it to him. But Sabo, he was strong before the Maramura. Now adding the Maramura, adding training, Sabo is going to rise up this list as well. Personally, I think he's the one that fights Akainu. So like Luffy, like Shiryu, you have to start scaling him a bit higher. I wasn't sure where to place her, but off of Portrayal, being somewhat peers of Garp and Sengoku, the respect she gets, especially from someone like Doflamingo, where Doflamingo doesn't respect anyone. But for some reason, Tsuru, he respects her to the point where he runs away, and apparently she's a master strategist. She has a special role in the Marines. Tsuru is somebody that we haven't seen her fight. Of course, the devil fruit is a bit weird, the washing fruit or whatever, but I think she's garnered the respect based on how she's performed in the past. So I wasn't sure where to put her, but I think in her prime, she's probably around Admiral level, but couldn't really defeat any real Admiral characters or people that were promoted to Admiral. But she reminds me of Garp, in which she wanted to just roam around like she was chasing after the Don Quixote pirates. Hopefully we get some more story behind that as to why she was so affixed on Doflamingo, but Tsuru, I'm okay with where she is. Nothing much to go off of here other than the fact that he's an Admiral and he's apparently on the level of Fujitora. Like, they're both monsters as stated by Doflamingo. So we have to wait and see exactly how strong he really is, but the title got him this rank. And again, right here, you could slide in Momosagi and Chaton if they were on the list because they were stated to be, you know, Admiral level candidate or Admiral candidates, but they're just not on the list right now. Ben Beckman, again, he's scaled higher because of the hype behind Shanks' commanders. Ben Beckman did get some hype outside of the story where they said that Ben Beckman is the moon to Shanks' sun. And you can take that in many ways. A lot of people take it to power scaling, where Ben Beckman, based on what they said about him, where if Shanks is the sun, Ben Beckman is the moon. And that's in a way saying Ben Beckman is comparable in strength to Shanks. So for me, he's the strongest commander currently. In his prime, I have other commanders over him, but that's the respect that I give for Shanks' crew. They've been mentioned in the story to be different from the other crews, so you have to give him that respect. We saw what he could do in Dressrosa, just lifting the rubble with no effort at all. His devil fruit, I think, is overpowered. Oda can make that as strong as he wants to. He's a swordsman as well. He's blind, so regular shit doesn't affect him. Observation haki through the roof. We have to see more from him. He did get beat up apparently by the revolutionary commanders, but again, there were 4 commanders, 2 admirals, but we have to get context because a lot of things, when you lack context, you jump to conclusions. And my conclusion is that Fujitora is still a top tier character. So for me, number 20. Thought about putting him higher, but I don't think Oden ever reached his full prime because he died early. People think he's still alive. I don't think so. But going off of when I expected him to die, I think Oden had the potential to be a top 10, maybe top 5 character, but he just died early. From how Oda hyped him up to everything he accomplished, the Kaido feat, he was well on his way to be an amazing character, but he just died too young. Personality wise, we downplay him because we haven't seen the best out of him. He doesn't seem to take much seriously. He just goes about his day. He just does what he wants to do. And a lot of people feel like that lackadaisical attitude that takes away from his power. But I think that's just who he is. You have to respect what he brings to the table. I think he's extremely versatile, where even when Rayleigh was fighting him, he just pulled out his sword and was fighting on par with Rayleigh. Even though it was an old Rayleigh, I don't necessarily view Kizaru as a swordsman, but that's the admirals. They're trained in various fighting styles, and you could definitely argue Kizaru higher, but they're monsters ahead of him, and I think it could go either way. Like, most of the people on this list, like the top 10, top 15, is really close. It's not an overpowering thing. Well, for some of them, but I think Kizaru, based on where he is, could definitely take people that are ahead of him. So I don't want you guys to misconstrue this. Just because someone is ranked higher or lower doesn't mean they can't beat people that's higher on the list than them. Like, this is an overall strength list, so maybe Greenbow could beat Kizaru, or maybe Tsuru could beat Kizaru, but for right now, I think Kizaru could defeat more people than Tsuru could, if that makes sense. A lot of people think Rayleigh's top 5 all time. I don't think so at all. I think what keeps it here for me is the fact that the Whitebeard Pirates and the Roger Pirates fought, and they fought for 3 days. If Rayleigh was a top 5 character, where they had 2 top 5 characters, and you had Whitebeard and Oden, maybe a top 15 character, and Rayleigh's that strong, apparently in his prime, and it took 3 days, something is off here. Right? Something is off. So as people scale Rayleigh to Roger, I think Roger was clearly stronger than Rayleigh. One could assume if Rayleigh was on Oden's level, what Roger did to Oden, he would do to Rayleigh as well. And that's how I look at it. I think Rayleigh is slightly stronger than Oden because he had more time to hone his skills and be more experienced, and he lived longer. So I give him the edge, but he's not top 5 all time, guys. Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman currently. An amazing character, a very strong character, someone that was on par with Shanks when he was younger. Well, people say he's on par with Shanks now, even stronger. But for me, while Mihawk is the greatest swordsman in the world, and that's indisputable, I think he's a bit underrated. And I'm not trying to underrate him here because I think Mihawk is extremely powerful. It's just stronger people ahead of him or have better portrayal, in my opinion. He has a lot that you can add to his name, where again, Shanks' rival, Supreme Great Blade, one of 2 Black Blades that we know of. Overall portrayal in the story hasn't really been touched yet, but there are things you can use to take away from him as well. Fought Shanks a long time ago. Shanks wasn't a Yonko as yet. I don't want to say he had a tough time against Vista, but he didn't completely overwhelm Vista with 1 hit. And Vista, from what we know, is a commander level character. He had to talk him down, but for me personally, I think it goes more so towards his personality, but I can't just leave it out. Once we see more from him, he could definitely rise on this list. But for right now, the characters above him, I think if he fought them, the other characters would win more matches. One may be interchangeable, and that's the person we have next.